go. Alright. That took a little bit longer than expected because for some reason my window got lost that I was looking for. So, anyway, this is a segment that I've decided to start doing called A Language You Might Not Have Heard of. I was kind of inspired to do this rather spontaneously because somehow ended up going down a Uralic rabbit hole earlier this week and discovered that there was a fair bit of useful content for learning one of the lesser-known Uralic languages, Udmurt, also known as Wojciech. And so today we're going to be talking a little bit about Udmurt. Now, the Uralic languages are a very early forking language family. Apparently, around 5,000 years is when it's estimated to have forked off into the Samoyedic languages, which are all critically endangered and are spoken in northern Siberia and various places. And having looked, it's hard to find any resources for learning them. And the Finno-Ugric languages, which includes probably the only ones that most people who don't speak them have heard of, which would be Finnish, Hungarian, and Estonian, which themselves are from two different branches. Hungarian is an Ugric language, Finnish and Estonian are Finnic languages, as is Udmurt. And so, let's talk a little bit about Udmurt. So, Udmurt is mostly spoken in the Udmurt Republic of Russia, but also in a few other places. Roughly 270,000 people speak it. From a distance, the Udmurt flag looks is easy to confuse with the Canadian flag. And the main thing, one of the most distinctive features of the writing system is they like to stick dots on top of things, including things that you don't normally stick dots on top of in other languages, like consonants. So, I had found as part of my going down this particular rabbit hole a channel called Quora, which is supported apparently by the Ministry of Ethnic Policy of the Udmurt Republic and has language tutorials in both English and Russian. So we're gonna just have a little look at this one.
Do you know that there are two official state languages?
Yes, Udmurt is also Russia's main source of ginger people. So, let's just have a look at this.
What do you think? Tchaikovsky, the composer Pelmeni, and the AK-47 have in common. Their homeland is Udmurtia.
Okay, this is annoyingly slow. Let's see if I just adjust the quality. Take it below HD, because I think I'm having bandwidth problems here. At 720. That should be good enough.
It's one of the federal subjects in Russia.
Do you know that there are two official state languages? Udmurtia is the second island, as there are a lot of red-haired people. The Ginger Festival is held annually in Izhevsk, the capital of our republic.
And if you want to taste the most delicious pelmeni and Udmurt pizza, that is called perepech, then you should learn the Udmurt language.
Okay. And so this is the channel. I'm just gonna have a look at this one briefly. There are 2 seasons of this in the English language version. It isn't really the sort of comprehensible input that you'd need in order to really properly acquire the language. You definitely get a good introduction to the features of it, and yeah. Just drop the link to this into chat.
Тетя Буречь, that's the way the Udmurts say hello. Мы нам не мы, Настя. That's the way the Udmurts introduce themselves. Take this language course, watch 10 video lessons, and you'll be able to speak just like me. Мы нам не мы, Настя.
And you can, if you know Finnish, you'll hear some familiar stuff here, like Minam Numi. That sounds kind of like Minun Nimi. They are fairly far apart, Finnish and Udmurt, but if you watch carefully, you do find some similarities.
Udmurt kılın veraş kişko.
Cool, kieli.
Dışatış. Mınım küçük mı sarız. Mınım kelşe şahmatın.
This is annoyingly slow. Udmurt
is one of the Finno-Ugric languages.
Oh, that's nice. I just spent all this time looking for this tree, and they've got the tree here.
This means that Udmurt has a lot in common with Estonian, Finnish, Hungarian, Mari, and particularly with the Komi language.
And one of the things that is particularly distinctive about Udmurt, and to me makes it sound like Turkish, is that unlike other Finno-Ugric languages, it doesn't actually stress things on the first syllable. It prefers to stress things on the last syllable.
For example, some words in these languages sound similar because a long time ago our ancestors used to speak the same language. I'll prove it. Juuni, to drink, in Udmurt. Juni in Komi, and juoma in Estonian.
And juoda in Finnish.
There are of course some differences in our languages. For example, in Komi and Estonian, the stress is normally placed on the first syllable of a word. Udmurt places the stress on the last syllable of a word, just like French does. There are sure some exceptions from the rule. Sometimes we stress the first syllable as well. For example, in imperative verbs.
I like that stress.
Which means go off. We also put the stress on the first.
Okay, but go off in what sense, though? I can't speak to all Turkic languages because the only one I have any familiarity with at all is Turkish, to a much lesser extent Azerbaijani. But yeah, there tends to be a final stress in Turkic languages. Koşku, go off, or like
syllable in the negative verb forms. For example, "Ой, koşku," I didn't leave or I haven't left. The same happens with some compound words and borrowed words. Shumpotını, to be glad. Computer, computer.
And also, Udmurt has Turkish borrowings. In fact, the word for world in Udmurt is dünya, which is a Turkish pronunciation of an Arabic word.
Start learning Udmurt are normally frightened by the number of cases. There are 15 of them.
Udmurt is mostly spoken in the Udmurt Republic, which is in central Russia, not far from the Urals. There are also Udmurt-speaking communities, if I remember correctly, in Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and a few other places. It's a bit of a hike to get there.
Yep. Inanimate nouns can have 15 forms, and most of the animate nouns can have 8 forms.
Now, let me just, this kind of dovetails with the video I'm working on Finnish cases, on why they aren't as scary as they seem. Because the thing about these cases is, for the most part, what they actually are doing is stuff that prepositions do in other languages. For the most part, like if you're the inassive case is just how you say in, for example. The abessive case is how you say without, and things like that. So it sounds like you have to memorize a whole lot of case endings, but actually you end up memorizing less, because you don't have to memorize a whole bunch of prepositions to go with them like you do in German, where you have to, like, there's an entire song, aus nach Zeit von zu, and I don't remember actually how it goes, because it's been a very long time since I had to sing the damn thing.
The thing is that this big number of cases makes it easier to learn the language. You don't have to learn a lot of prepositions. Let's have a look.
Well, there we go.
Korka, a house. Korkan, in the house. Korkati, around the house. Korkash, from the house.
Interesting.
We'll discuss.
Like, I can't think. Okay, now Finno-Ugric languages are not entirely an area that I know all that well. The only one I really have any serious familiarity with is Finnish, but I can't off the top of my head think of another one where the word for house sounds like korka. Like in Finnish, the closest thing I can think of actually is the word for height, korkeus. Like, in Finnish, and I believe in Estonian as well, the word for house is talo. And then in Hungarian, which is, again, another branch entirely of the Finno-Ugric language, the Ugric languages, they say haz.
That later in the next lessons. Stay with us. The good news is that Udmurt doesn't have a category of gender, unlike many languages do. We use a personal singular pronoun so to refer to both a man and a woman. Nil, a girl, is so. Pi,
and
is so.
For Finnish speakers, that's going to look familiar, because in Finnish, the inanimate third person, which sometimes is also used for people, is se.
Well, the same pronoun we use to refer to all the other nouns in the third person. Korkasile, sojujit, nilsile, socheber, pisile, sonocheber, ishpishishke, sopichi.
And note, one interesting thing there is they don't actually, much like Russian and unlike Finnish, for example, but like Hungarian, they don't really use to be in the present tense. They just kind of skip. They just combine an adjective or a predicate nominative and the subject.
What else should you know before starting learning Udmurt? Our language doesn't have prepositions. Instead, we use postpositions. Dunye, the world.
There we
in the
go.
world is translated as dunyeun. You can also translate in the
That is a
world
Turkic
using
borrowing
postpositions.
of an Arabic
vılın.
borrowing.
Dunye, vılın, and dunyeun have the same meanings.
So I guess that means that Turkic was shorting Arabic words at the time.
You can use both. Word order in Udmurt is not as strict as in English, but you should remember that the verb is normally placed at the end of the sentence. For example, Dunjevëllën viçyshimdon shurs pala udmurtjos ulo. Zhalesa virano, van udmurtjos anai kılınızı ugverashko.
Yeah, like all of that just sounds immediately, my brain immediately reads that as Turkish. because of the stress pattern there. And also partially because you have like things kulunuzı, like the second person plural possessive, the second person plural suffix full stop in Turkish is iniz, and kuliniz is their language. Kul is language. That is like kieli in Finnish and kel in Estonian. Yeah, Tatar is also a Turkic language too.
Noshmon verashkishko. Oskishko tino jogen verashkody. These are the main features of the Udmurt language. We will discuss them later during the next lesson, and you'll sure learn something new about Udmurt. So, subscribe to the channel and join us at the next lesson.
They also have an interesting series of lectures by linguists. They're in Udmurt with English and Russian subtitles about interesting features of the Udmurt language, including like how actually the relationship with Turkic, because apparently they fairly early on started to have, there were actually Muslim communities very early on in the history of Islam in Udmurtia, in the Urheimat, and they actually brought in, if I remember correctly, Turkish emissaries to lecture on Islamic law. And so you have actually, unlike a lot of other Finno-Ugric languages, you have actually quite a lot of, Finnic languages, I should say. Ugric languages tend to have more Turkish because they tend to be further south, they tend to have more connections. But, like, particularly like Finnish and Estonian don't really have a whole lot of Turkic borrowings or Arabic borrowings, but Udmurt does. So that is, okay, we're going to look at this channel a little bit more. There's all sorts of interesting stuff here. So here's Artyom, who does the Russian version of this. He has what to me is like, I don't know, the classic Russian haircut somehow. I see that haircut, I immediately know they're probably from Russia. So here we have, this is a lecture on Udmurt dialects, and here we go about the writing system and how they use all these extra dots that they put on things. The joke is made in both the Russian and the English version that Udmurt is a language for people who like dots. Is they use the dots for affricate sounds that don't actually exist in Russian, since they use the Cyrillic alphabet. They have these extra things. Like, they have a difference between zh, j, and j, for example, and the dots do that. And then on vowels, the dots, on the vowel E, the dots are used to distinguish between palatalized and non-palatalized consonants preceding, sort of like the hard sign in Russian. So, all sorts of interesting stuff. There's also, let me see, we've got, there's Udmurt music on here. All sorts of neat stuff. So, that is just an introduction to Udmurt. And yeah, so I'm going to be doing more of these segments as we go, and the link is in chat, and I'm going to be putting this up on YouTube as well, and I'll put the link in the description there. And if you enjoy this, if you have like languages you'd like me to focus on, to do a segment like this on, please let me know. I'm definitely looking for also, especially languages that aren't well known, but that have actual language learning materials on YouTube or elsewhere. I'm very interested in hearing about that, and I'll probably showcase other languages as the series continues.